to me that the prohibition from communicating from tax return clients about auxiliary services may be a violation of our constitutional right to freedom of speech. Maybe. Also, I think it's unfair, it's a restraint of trade, because the guy next door who offers the same service can talk to them about it without any problem, but we can't. Okay. Just because we prepared an income tax return for that person. CCH has a real nice website they put together here where they sort of brought a lot of the material together, so you might take a look at that. As I say, Cameco also has some references on its website. My opinion, again, the use rules are totally out of touch with the realities of modern CPA firm practice. I mean, maybe even ancient CPA firm practice. We've always been involved in advising clients. So, anyway, they don't come to just have a haircut, have a tax return prepared. They expect and deserve more. The non-disclosure rules, okay, I can understand. I'll do my best. All right, now I have another item here. I'm sort of getting beyond now the disclosure use. This is item 1, page 6. Be careful when accessing databases. So people have gotten in trouble because they tried to access information for people who weren't their clients on the Franchise Tax Board website. Now, many of you know that it's awful easy to get into that stuff. And in this particular case, this was an ex-spouse of a client that the person did. And there are other ones, I don't know what all of it is. I'm just sort of bringing this to your attention to remind your team members that this is a big, big no-no. You do not access people's information without getting their consent, and I would suggest getting their written consent. Now, most of you must be like me, right? The Franchise Tax Board's been sending out, they've got a new registration process for accessing information online. And what they remind you on there is, they say it over and over again, with the client's consent, with the client's consent. So you might even think about getting a written consent when you are going to access clients' information online. And I mean, what is the regular thing that we do every tax season? We look at to make sure they made their estimated tax payments, right? I mean, I do. And so get their, I would suggest, written consent in the file before you do that. Again, if they don't complain, probably not going to really be a problem. But I'll tell you, somebody complained on this other issue. Okay, that's how it came up. And they didn't complain to the Franchise Tax Board, they complained to the State Board of Accountancy. All right, and you can have your ticket pulled, folks. That's your living, right? How many of you think this was an important program to come to today? Are you glad you came? I hope so. All right, let's talk a little bit about tax return preparer registration. Actually, all of you are registered already, right? Maybe I should say, can I embarrass you and say, raise your hand if you have not renewed your P10? I had somebody that called me just the other day and they said, I don't want to get a P10. And I said, you know, sort of too bad. But anyway, so the IRS basically did a study and found a lot of tax returns that are being prepared by commercial tax return preparers are garbage. And particularly they identified for unregistered preparers, which was not the CPAs, attorneys or enrolled agents. But even though there are CPAs, enrolled agents, and attorneys that screw up anyway. So they decided to have new examination, registration, and continuing education standards. And we all know this. Okay. So what I'm talking about, though, is a little bit of the unfriendly environment that I was talking about. So most of you know that last year the IRS sent out about, I think, 10,000 letters reminding certain preparers about what their responsibilities and tax practice was. It was very friendly. And then they went out and they visited many of these people. stormtroopers outside the door. They went in and reminded and had a friendly conversation about, some of their responsibilities. Some of which we don't even necessarily agree were responsibilities, because they were talking about something to the level of an audit of a Schedule C when you prepare for a taxpayer, which of course we aren't really required to do. But anyway. So I'm not going to go through all those details since you've all gone through that process, but one thing that is amazing for this is how broad it is. So it applies basically to all tax returns submitted to the IRS. So in other words, the people who work at ADP and Paychex also have to go through this process. Did you know that? Interesting, isn't it? Do they have to take the same test as somebody who's preparing an income tax return? I guess so. The real big concern that we have is, what about our team members? And in particular for me, what about interns that I hired during tax season? Well, my plan at this point is to get a P10. Anybody that's involved in tax return preparation, now they say if the person basically has prepared, you've given them this stuff here, prepare an income tax return and I'll review it. But if they do that, then that person should have a P10. The IRS is talking about, I don't know if you've heard this, the commissioner made a nice presentation to the tax division and the AICPA a few months ago. And they said they're looking at backing off a little bit on that, particularly for CPA firms, enrolled agents, and for attorneys. Of course, then the commercial tax return preparers said, well, wait a minute, why are you picking on us? Of course, the reason they're picking on them is they give them crap, but anyway, that's all right. And sometimes, by the way, those people do it. Many of them are very conscientious, but they have found quite a few problems there because they don't have the education that we do. All right. All right. So, anyway, estate tax returns, all income tax returns, gift tax returns, all of them now require P10s. Basically, you're going to be doing that for next year. For next year, there's not an examination requirement. Okay, so, and we're exempt anyway because we have our own, well, one, there's the examination requirement, but two, there's the education requirement. Neither one of them are going to apply for right now. They just want to get people to get a P10. Okay, but eventually people will need to get examined. We will not because we have a CPA exam. And they will need to have an education requirement, including certain coursework that's specified by the IRS and to be approved by the IRS. Again, that does not apply to us because we have our own education requirements right now. All right. Disclosure of uncertain tax positions. Oh, one of my favorites. So, this is a battle that's been going on the last few years. Basically, what's been happening is that the IRS, although they have been saying they would do it with restraint, have been going after financial statement work papers. And so, particularly, they're interested in the ones for the tax provisions. And anyway, and so particularly the larger firms have been fighting them tooth and nail, unsuccessfully, I might add. And so what the IRS tried to do was say, well, what is a way that we